3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Elric Ragoczy. Elric, how you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. Doing good.
Excellent. So you have a ton of things that you're interested in, right? One's going to be the occult, which catches my interest, right?
Yeah, I've been doing the occult for well over 20 years at this point. So
what's the
not a whole lot surprises me in it.
Yeah, go into detail on that.
So I started out early 2000s. I always knew I was a little different than, the average person. I always sensed things. I could pick up on conversations that I wasn't present for. People always said that my imaginary friends were a little overactive, and turns out they weren't imaginary. So early 2000s, on the cusp of being a teenager, I discovered witchcraft and started looking into it, and it was literally like an avalanche, just one thing after another. Come across Ray Buckland, the one that brought Wicca to the United States, from England. He was a fellow Ohioan at the time. I met him at a convention, and we started corresponding, and I learned a lot from him, and just kind of went through that for a little bit, discovered that wasn't really what it didn't really set perfectly for me. So I just started looking into other things. Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn. I loved their ceremonial magic setup. Moved on from that because that still felt a little too white lighty for me. Started looking into the darker side of things. I was the proverbial goth kid at the time, so of course. Ended up looking into the Church of Satan. It on the surface, it's this is really good, but then it's as you delve deeper into it, you start seeing that it was really more of an edgy marketing, for the 60s and 70s.
Right.
30 years later, it just kind of had that Marilyn Manson Antichrist superstar feel, delved even deeper than that, and ended up looking into Crowley's work. Wasn't a terrible big fan of it. He's got some good stuff, but it just seems like he goes off the rails too much. And so in the process of that, there was mentions of various things that led me to the Ars Goetia and the Ars Paulina, and that's where it all started hardcore for me. That would have been about 2004. So
as I dive deeper into, because the show I'm doing, it's pretty good of variety, but I've been really, really focused on ufology and paranormal because it's got my interest. And to be honest, it's that question of what's after this, and you're questioning your own mortality at that point. And it's only fair if I'm gonna, go out and research the afterlife, or at least get questions for there of it. You have to look at every religion, because every religion's pretty different. And I find overall, every religion has a pretty positive message there, right? It's until somebody who's charismatic and self-serving takes the helm of it is when it becomes a little, twisted, because they're, again, they're in it for their own interest, or maybe an organization. But in the occult now, with Satanism, it's one of the questions I always ask, and I ask this to the people of Catholicism the same, because I kind of think I view God as an architect. I don't think it's a being that made us in his image, because especially now, when you look at space research, there's no way he made just us. It's impossible, right? Now, on the flip side, for Satan or Lucifer, whatever you call him, this could be a disgruntled architect, but I don't know enough about it to even call him disgruntled. I'm not even sure. What is the perspective from the occult of what Satan is?
It's kind of the same as any other path, religion. You go to a Protestant, you go to a Catholic, ask them about God, you're going to get, you ask 10,000 people, you're going to get 999 different answers, you know.
Right.
I myself fall under what's called Luciferian Gnostic. Like you said about God being an archetype or architect, sorry. I wouldn't disagree. Even astrophysicists now are like, yeah, there's no way we're alone in the universe, you know, the superverse even.
Right.
So if you break down, I've done a lot of research. I've got a couple good friends that are Bible scholars. One of them has actually been to the Vatican and had access to the vault. And, you know, we've had a lot of discussions about it, how if you break down biblically, God is two different beings even then. The Old Testament God is a lot different than the New Testament God.
Right.
The Old Testament God is El Shaddai. It's actually one of the spirits that I've been working with for, about 8 months now. El Shaddai is very much like the old father. I guess if you were going to kind of equate it for somebody, I would think of him kind of like Odin in a way.
Right.
The New Testament God, or Yahweh, people often think that it's all, you know, different names for the same being, but it's actually not. And it's much the same way with Satan. Satan is a title, not a name.
Right.
It's not necessarily a being.
It's a man-made title nonetheless. That
too. Because Hebrew, it's Ha-Satan, which is the adversary. So to look at Satan in the same aspect, you have Lucifer, you know, the original rebel, and then you have the second wave of the rebellion of the Watchers. The leader of the Watchers at the time was Shemyaza. So those two would technically, I mean, they're two separate beings, widely different energies, widely different aspects. They themselves would be, because they're adversarial, they would fall under that umbrella of Satan, you know?
Right.
So it's like, you just dig through, and the more spirits you encounter, you know, on either side, you find that they fall under a certain umbrella.
Yeah, you know, a big thing too. This is a 4 billion-ish year old planet. And I do a lot of off podcast interviews, like I'd spoken to you on the phone, right? And we had a pretty decent conversation. I have this with a lot of these other people that are science minded and are out there investigating the paranormal. And, you know, it seems to be a common pattern where they're coming across energies that predate humanity, something that lived here long before we were considered a thought in the universe. And when you take that into calculation of where we are now versus where this planet began, you know, science wants to say that this planet was inhabitable in its beginning, but for us, maybe, we don't know the biology, what ran around here prior. And even in some of the paranormal people I'd spoken to, some of them come across these energies that they wash their hands of it. They want nothing to do with it. It doesn't respond to religious jargon, right? When you're trying to expel it. It's so the thing with this is the conclusion I come to anyway. The idea of God being an architect. If you look at the solar system, it's pretty mechanical, and we're the only planet that has a moon to its size and relevant and to the size of its planet. It operates almost with perfection the way it is. Like the solar eclipses, the lunar eclipses, the tidals. It seems like a clockmaker made it, right? And you don't see this exampled anywhere else. But then I was watching a documentary recently where they said even if Jupiter remotely went out of its pattern slightly, or just anything in our solar system slightly changed, it would be detrimental to us. So I definitely think there's an architect at hand. And then when you look at a cosmic web, and I'll give this to you and see what you think. When you look at a cosmic web and you look at the construct of the human brain, because our brain is currently on the planet the most powerful computer in existence right now. We've yet to replicate it or even understand it for that matter. I kind of think that Earth, and I think Earth is one of many Earths throughout the vastness of the universe, they're proving grounds. And depending on what you do here, you either recycle because you didn't do good enough and you're recycled, you got to start over, or you did so great here that you get recycled, you're needed here. And or you go to the next plane. Because if you look at the cosmic web and how everything's constructed and connected, it's like fiber optic cables. Like that energy and that information travels to wherever it has to almost instantly. You know, it's distance is not a factor there. So that being said, when I hear people debate God and Satan, it makes me wonder, like, these are older energies and we're just giving to the best that we do. Like humans, we do this all the time. If we don't understand it, well, we'll title it to the best we get it. Does that make sense for you?
Oh yeah. I'm kind of a similar stance on the like universe being a recycling. I see it more kind of like a simulation. There's a band that I'm a big fan of that they did a song recently. The band's called Seven. They did a song called The Simulation. And we had a long conversation before that song was released about how it seems like we're in some kind of almost like super galactic video game in a way, you know, because if you look at all these things that, like you said, you know, 4 billion years, and that doesn't even take into account that Earth used to have 2 moons. You know, there used to be 2 moons, and the original one actually slammed into the planet and reset life by 2 billion years. Any sense of evolution that was going on at that time was reset by 2 billion years. So considered to other planets that are Earth-like, we're 2 billion years behind them. So, you know, as advanced as we've become, think of what 2 billion years more, you know, would do.
It's true. I read that somewhere else, that we had a second smaller moon that collided with us. And, you know, I read and watch a lot of Graham Hancock, and he, you know, he's under the impression I get from him is that there's been a lot of catastrophic events that have, you know, civilizations have come and gone. Now you're talking about an event with a smaller moon that collides, which is beyond catastrophic. And anything that predates humanity that lives here, that would absolutely wipe them out of existence. You know, and then factor that in too, right? Because it just, to find dinosaurs, their bones wasn't no easy feat 65 million years ago. But that's 65 million years. We're barely finding that. To find smaller beings after a catastrophic event like that, I don't think that's possible. It's, you know, it's completely wiped. Their energy, like ours, like the people ask all the time, well, what are ghosts? Well, if you look at our brain, and this is my thought, our consciousness and our consciousness and our soul are the same thing, one and the same. It's just described differently. So, like us, if you die, right? Let's say you die, you get shot instantly. Your energy's in this standstill of what the hell just happened? And I think that's somewhat what some of the ghosts are. Like there's something happen instant, or they have pushback. They don't want to die, and they end up staying behind. Same for these energies that are predating man. They're around, and that's why I really believe some of these things that they're calling demonic. I think that they're predating humanity, and I think if you speak with enough confidence, maybe you could expel them. But most times, I don't hear a lot of successful stories from people removing these evil energies. In fact, the majority of people that investigate the paranormal, they seem to steer away from it. They want nothing to do with it. So,
for me, it's kind of the opposite. You know, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung. So, in the same aspect of knowing yourself and your shadow, to know the world around you, you have to delve into the good and the bad of both energies and spirits. You know, for example, you know, you talk about predating humanity. In early Sumerian, you know, there's not a whole lot known. We think we know a lot, but there's, you know, the scholars and the archaeologists have even said we've maybe unearthed 15% of their entire trace and records and everything. Right. We still can't even, it's like a handful of people that can actually write and speak Sumerian as best as we can figure it. You know, that tells you how difficult it is and how lost it is. And There's actually a mention, I've brought this up in other podcasts that I've done. One of the things that predates humanity is the Cthulhu mythos. Funny enough, people think H.P. Lovecraft wrote that. In my own research and discovery, I did digging and found that there was actually mention of Cthulhu as far back as 1912 or 1913, which is almost a full 10 years before Lovecraft penned anything of the Cthulhu mythos. In the ancient Sumerian text, it mentions, it's just a side mention of something that they translated. They didn't go into depth, any real elaboration of it, but it mentions this being named Cthulhu. That's name means son of the abyss or son of the deep. Well, gee, that sounds a lot like, Lovecraft's. And on the spiritual side, when you start delving into that, you start seeing that these are indeed not fictional characters. These are actual real beings, and they have their own bylaws, their own corollary laws of interaction, of existence, of just a way of being. It's definitely not something for the faint of heart, that's for sure. You can't go into it with a weak constitution or a weak volition, and expect to come out even sane, possibly. Much like in the stories it talks about. I mean, it drove H.P. Lovecraft almost insane dealing with them. So yeah, there's definitely something that is, aeonic in age, well beyond humanity and well beyond what we could even trace on this planet. Maybe they were around well before, that moon crashed into Earth and all traces are gone.
Right. I agree. The Sumerians had a tablet discovered that depicted our solar system to perfection long before a telescope, way before scholars even gotten. You're talking about when there wasn't even Catholicism. There wasn't even religion. These are tribal people that are, or at least I assume that. I mean, like you said, we don't know a lot about them. Maybe one day we find something that tells us more, but for right now, though, a tablet that depicts our solar system and the planets in it to the number in order, come on. However, I don't know why that doesn't stir the pot a little more. I've heard some people like, wow, it's fake, but I did the trace of that. An archaeologist found it. There's nothing false about it. It's just bizarre that it happens to be perfectly depicted. And you can't tell me that these people weren't educated, intelligent, or at least guided by something advanced. By all means.
Oh, definitely.
That's what a lot of the ufology people with the ancient aliens, if I believe any of that, that is where I believe that. Because how else would they know that? Like we struggled to find Neptune for a long time. We theorized it was there based upon lights and like some faint light that was between the two planets. It was really, really later on when we had a conclusion. It's there, and even so, how did these people predating any of this technology notice? So something's at hand there. Something was influencing them because there's no way they just made it up. It's too perfect.
I mean, that goes for almost every old tradition. I mean, people like to, point out Babylonian, Sumerian, the error in this or that. Well, then if you go and look in Native American, you go look at Native Mexico, Aztec, Mayans, Guatemala area and stuff. Go up to northern Canada where the Inuit are. They all have stories that match about these beings coming from the sky. It exists in Egypt. It exists in China, Japan, Fiji Island natives. Everywhere in the world have these stories of these beings that came out of the sky and taught them knowledge. I mean, the best one I've ever seen is the Dogon tribe of Africa. They're the ones that discovered the Sirius stars, in the sense of they had a map that depicted, Sirius A, B, and even C, and that there were planets nearby. And it wasn't until the 70s that, that our spacecraft got a look at it and said, yes, this is, correct. And then even now we're starting to look and see that around, I think it's Sirius C, that there's traces that are probably planets. If that map is indeed 1-1 accurate, then there's 3 or 4 planets rotating that star. And that's where the dog people came from. So that now you're getting into some like Elder Scrolls stuff. And, this is a whole nother life form. It's not even humanoid.
Right.
They look like walking dogs at this point, or bipedal dogs as we would equate them on Earth.
Well, consider this. If we were the predominant species here, probably dolphins would be, right? Because they're a pretty intelligent creature. And if they were, the only thing that prevents them from evolving is that they're trapped in their environment. But I would imagine over the course of time with evolution, maybe, because I often wondered if there's a planet out there that's it's strictly water and there's intelligent beings on that planet, they can't explore space because how do you escape your environment? You have to now create a craft that also holds water in it to sustain you for long distances. So there's the idea of there being dog people or even reptilian people. In the beginning of this podcast, I was like, nah, that's crazy talk. But then who am I to say how evolution works in some other planet? We don't know. Here it happened to be humanity. We stem from apes. It could be in another planet. The lizards made their move, right? They started evolving, becoming technologically advanced. And another planet, it could have been a dog or a bear. It just really depends on how evolution, fairly treats you or not.
I mean, with the dominant species, if it hadn't been for the dinosaur reset, who knows where they would be now.
Yeah.
Evolution, we like to think of them as these dumb lizards with tiny brains, but we don't know. We really don't.
We speculate like the raptors, the velociraptors are intelligent, and because of their cranial structure, and that's being based upon today's animals. But we do that because we see our brain and how our brain works, and we compare it. But we don't know how complex another one's brain. Look at a dolphin brain; it's like a donut, But they're very sophisticated, and I really truly believe if dolphins were to make that move, or they evolve to a point where they get out of water, they could very well be a bipedal or quadrupedal or whatever it is creature down the road. I mean, no, undoubtedly.
Well, that's with the dinosaurs. Like you said about the reptilians, what's to say that, 8-10 billion years, maybe longer, because even still we can't exactly do anything more than theorize. And even that's just like kind of a ballpark wild guess of how long it's been since the Big Bang or since the beginning or whatever, so you get into that, and it's like, what if there was a species of reptile on another planet that's completely inhospitable to humans? I mean, reptiles on this planet can survive in conditions that humanity cannot. We can maybe for a short time, but then it just gets to be too much. It's too dry. It's too hot. Conditions are too hostile.
Right.
What's to say on another planet that, the reptiles, after 14 billion years of, constant upward evolution, haven't developed their own space programs, haven't developed their own colonization, adaptation, I
was just talking to Robert Spears, I'm sorry, MUFON. And, my theory, the gray alien, I personally think the small gray aliens are advanced biological robots. I think the tall, and they're modeled after their creator, clearly, right? The taller ones that I hear a lot of people say are more biological are, they're bigger, and so they don't come to Earth. And whenever they do come here, everyone says they appear through these walls. Well, that sounds crazy until you start applying modern day science to it. These could be advanced holograms. We had Tupac do a concert long after death. You know what I mean? And it looked pretty convincing. So now you have these beings that when they do come in there to look at you in your place and they're going through walls, this is an advanced hologram. That's why the smaller grays they seem more, tangible. You can touch them. They're physically there. I think they're biological robots. And I think other species do come here. But I think the grays that are initially here rent them out. They like the reptilians, for example. Like, well, look, you want to go on Earth? We're watching these people. Here's our gray aliens. They're proven. They get the job done. They're really good. We got the new upgrades. Just rent this out, but don't get involved. Here are the rules. You can't do this, that, and the other thing. It's like National Geographic. And to that point, it's like what you said about us not being able to survive in their environment. I don't think they could survive in ours. And if they're going to do a hybrid study, this doesn't happen in a generation. That you're talking millennia for that to happen. That is, even with advanced technology, it would take a very, very long time to make that feasible to happen, where you have two species and they're hybrid. Now they can live on your planet. And it's not the ones that originally come here. They're not going to be able to cross over. It's the future generations, which leads me to this. And like you were telling me, at a young age, you were feeling like, I didn't really belong, and you got involved in the occult. Here's a common pattern I find. A lot of things stemming around the occult have something to do with ufology and the paranormal. And it just might be that you're a little bit more intuitive, right? Or a little more open to the idea of suggestive, if we're going to do a hybrid program, or if we're going to have someone that we could speak to. It makes more sense for people like you to have these connections, other than the I'm not making fun of them, but if you're beating the Bible and you're, Wednesday this and Sunday that, you're closed off. You're wearing filters, so you're not going to be acceptable to whatever's coming. You're going to have pushback. So I don't know. It gets my mind. Like for me, I've never witnessed anything. And I think it's because I'm a bit of a pain in the ass, right? I think they're like, if we talk to this guy, he's not going to leave us alone, right? Because I won't. I want to know answers. Like, it's hard for me. I want to know what's on the other side of the universe, but I'm one of those people, man. I lose sleep watching documentaries, right? So what are your feelings on that? The occult and paranormal and ufology, the middle ground there?
Oh, definitely. Funny enough, in the current LHP where, I'm most active, I was one of the people that really brought a resurgence of that up. A lot of other occultists were afraid to talk about extraterrestrials and the connections to the occult. And there was a couple that they had made passing mention, and in private they expressed, great interest, but they were afraid of the kickback and the ridicule of it, because it's kind of ironic that you can get people that come into the occult fully believing in spirits and, ghosts and all that. But the minute you bring up intelligent, non-terrestrial life, they go off the hinges with insults about you're crazy, you're one of those tinfoil hat wearing people, so on and so forth. So it's kind of like, you don't even see your own hypocrisy. Gotcha.
You see, and that's where and for those people in Christian faith or other faiths that are like, oh, the occult's bad, you're just like them. You're the same thing. When an open mind brings up an open subject about the possibility of something being slightly different, the pushback begins.
On my podcast, numerous times I had a close friend of mine. He used to do it was called Ant's Alien Farm, and the topic was all about extraterrestrials. He's a lifelong contactee. I was a contactee from the time I was born up until about 2016. So we've met many others. I mean personally, years ago I used to be friends with Audrey and Deb's of Starborn Support. So, I've met many through them. Just going about, I've met many other contactees, and we can always find the commonalities, whether we know it or not. Sometimes it just pops up during conversations. Like you said about the holograms. I myself, my friend, both Audrey and Deb Hewins have seen it. Certain grays have this, like a neural network in their head.
Right.
Like when you see them, it almost looks like a wiring in a way. It usually pulses in like a green or blue color.
Yeah. And before anyone gets the opportunity to say, oh, this guy's crazy, we're starting Neuralink. Okay. We're going to have chips in our brain. And initially it's going to be there to help people with, brain injuries, but ultimately we'll be able to communicate with no words, just a knowing. And to add to that, many years ago, when people say, oh, they're speaking with telepathy and they're calling them crazy, look at Bluetooth. if you told someone back in the 70s that you could put something in your ear and talk to another person that might be in, Miami, he would call you nuts. That's just the reality. So now you're talking about a species very advanced, multi-advanced, and very well, they can have the biological ones and even the biomechanical robot ones will have the same chip to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It only makes sense.
I mean, you mentioned Bluetooth. I'm using Bluetooth. You probably use Bluetooth of the day. Millions of people are using Bluetooth. What they don't realize is these little things we're wearing in our ears actually stem from the 1947 Roswell crash, which a lot of people debate on about what really came out of it and what's all conspiracy theory.
Right.
Some say, oh, it was just an advanced government project. Well, it's kind of funny because, I'm in Ohio, not too far from where I grew up. There's actually old reports dating back as far as 1941 and 1943 of craft that are very, very similar to what crashed in Roswell, landing in fields. There was one farmer in 1943 that reported one, and I've seen the old archive. What do you call those things? It's not the paper. It's of the paper, but it's I can't even think of the word.
You talking about the documents from that?
Not from Roswell, but it's like you find them at the libraries. I wish the word is just not coming to mind. Pull them up on the screen, like a negative print, basically.
Right. I know what you're talking about. I don't. The word eludes me too for some reason.
Yeah. So it's like I've seen the actual paper from it. It was reported, I want to say, September or October of 1943, which is a full 4 years before Roswell. So there was no way that this was some post-Roswell hoax or some attention grab,
Right.
In the Roswell crash, one of the things recovered from one of the bodies was this piece that was lodged in the side of the head. And when they dissected it, and over the few years of reverse engineering, they discovered that it was a communication device. Well, here we are, 70 years later, Bluetooth
right.
is all the rage. That's not an accident. If you look at technological advancement in electro sciences, pre-1947, it was pretty damn slow going. Hell, even in the early 50s, 1 megabyte of storage. We think of megabyte now and it's like, oh, that's tiny.
Right.
Back then, it literally took a small warehouse is how big the computer had to be to store 1 megabyte of data. All of a sudden, after the reverse engineering of Roswell, which started to yield major advancement, I want to say it was 57 or 58. Start looking at computer technology's rapid advancement. By the 70s, computers are now in offices. IBM is kind of a household name in the sense of business. Its name even, business machines. It's just the jumps are just endless.
Well,
to
add to that, for a while when I first heard that, I gave pushback. I was like, no, I don't know, we're smart. But then our entire program from NASA is retro-engineered from something we stole from the German. We took German criminals to bring them here to create the rocket program that eventually got us to space and gave us interballistic missiles. So then I started looking at the technology from the 40s to the 80s. It is pretty significant. I can't personally say that's where it came from, but it definitely gives that story a little bit more weight. Especially if you look about I didn't notice either till maybe a year ago. GPS has been around a long time. It was military application. The internet's been around a long time, but it was military applications, right? And in current times, when people say, well, the technology you're talking about, it's a little fantastic still. And I'm talking to you right now with energy traveling through space.
Yep.
We're communicating there's no direct line to one another, right? This isn't a phone line. We're using towers and satellites, and people need to really come to grips with the idea that, we have advances, but imagine if there's a civilization that has just 1,000 years on us. Just imagine what we could do with 1,000 more years. Technology right now is leapfrogging. And to see the technological jump from the 40s till the 80s, I mean, there's a lot of support there for the case that something was definitely retro-engineered. Because everything we have in America it's pretty much retro-engineered. Pretty much. For the most part. All the great inventions anyway. Yeah. So, yeah, to support that, I would agree.
You know, I mean, even, you know, you and I are very close in age, and, you know, some of the listeners, I'm 34 going on 35. So think back when we were kids, a great example of leaps and bounds in technology, video games. You know, think back to Nintendo, Super Nintendo.
Yeah, 8-bit to 16-bit, and that took a while. Today it's...
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, you know, for us as kids, that switch from 8-bit to 16, or if you went over to Sega at 32-bit, you know, it was insanely different. Like, it was night and day. And the games that we have now, you know, like even Fortnite, as much as I despise the game, you know, we dreamed of our games being like that. You know, we had to engineer that in our mind, in a sense, and sink ourselves into it to play it that way.
And try to imagine, now there are like the for them, a detail is like, well, is this sunset? Does it look right? Is it real? How about the water? Like, I mean, like the detail that we look at, and the advancements in gaming today, it's crazy. It's literally, I looked at that. What's that game that it's on Xbox? The Matrix game, bro.
I mean, another good one that's all across the board, because, you know, I'm an Xbox to PC gamer. No Man's Sky. Yeah. I do not, for any ounce of me, believe that game was just somebody's imagination. That was definitely put into somebody's head. Maybe Sean Murray, maybe somebody else, but it got there because if you look at it, you know, there is, 16 quadrillion planets.
Yeah.
It would take literally for a human to try and explore every single one of those planets in just that one game. It would take something like 500 million years. And that's if you only spent 1 minute on each planet. You know, there's no way, you know?
You know, a lot of the things that we use today for technology, for space travel, came from the idea of it used to be like TV shows and movies. And now I think video games are starting to step up. I think a lot of people that are in like Elon Musk, I wonder how many video games he looks at. Like, I wonder if I can make that happen.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's crazy.
It's Star Trek, you know, the old Star Trek, you know, from even before us, they had a lot of things, cell phones for that matter. They had with the screen, like what we're using right now was literally on Star Trek 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, the communicators, and sure, they looked like walkie-talkies with a screen, but that's still a thing of, okay, how did they come up with that? You know, us as kids, we used to imagine how cool it would be we could talk to our friends without having to go to their house, or, you know, when they moved out of state, we had to wait until, you know, long distance was an option. Nowadays, I can sit and chat with somebody from Tokyo. I can sit and chat with somebody in Dubai or the Sahara, for that matter, without ever leaving my couch.
And instantly, too, because, you know, when I was a kid, my friend Jason and I had a couple of walkie-talkies, right? It was just enough range across the neighborhood to talk, right? And I remember being excited about this. It was crazy. Now, forget it. It's
right? Like Xbox Live, bro.
Yeah, honestly. People connected. So that being said, when we examine what it is we think's retro-engineered, when we take time to think about what we consider to be too fantastic for reality, go back 30 years. Because in 30 years ago, if you showed someone a smartphone, they'd be intrigued, but they're like, are you a wizard? You know? Yeah,
right. I remember, I was 7 or 8 when the old cell phones, you know, the ones that were like the size of a small explosive, you know.
Yeah, they work out to use them.
Yeah, like you had the giant antenna. It weighed about God, I think the one that I remember.
Yeah, they called it the Brick. That was the nickname, the Brick.
Yeah, that was accurate because they weighed a lot. And all they could literally do was on a good day make a phone call. So it was really the same kind of premise as the radios of World War II. You had to have the big antenna, you had to find the right reception, and you might get the call through kind of the old Verizon "can you hear me now" thing,
Yeah, now you got your phone and you're disgruntled if your screensaver is what you want.
Right. Like, so yeah, like you said, go back 30 years, show somebody a Samsung Galaxy, heck, even an S2, they'd be wildly amused by. Whereas we look at it and we're like, oh, that primitive piece of junk, Would you like me to call the Smithsonian for that dinosaur?
It's scary too, because I've just watched this documentary not long ago, and our cell phones today are 3,000 more times more powerful than will put us on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
We basically use math and hope to get to the moon, so
Yeah. Math and hope, I like that. That's like the best description to short form. How did we get to the moon? Math and hope.
Yeah, that's a lot of math and a lot of, oh shit, I hope we do this. Because
we hope they make it, and well, we really hope they come back.
Yeah, did you see the computers they had at NASA back then? They literally look they're like mobile homes with wheels on them.
Well, that's like I was saying earlier about how 1 megabyte was the size of industrial refrigeration units. And at the time, so what was it, 69 we went to the moon, supposedly
69.
So at that time, those computers were running maybe a gigabyte. Like all of them combined were probably processing around about a gigabyte or more of information at a time. And when you think about that, we stream Netflix movies that are 4, 5, 7 gigs.
Yeah. Go play GTA Online, Grand Theft Auto Online.
Yeah.
Forget it. That would power NASA and then some.
Yeah, heck, Call of Duty Warzone, or what's the new one, Vanguard? What is it, like 100? It's like 140 gigs to install that.
It's insane.
So you think back 1969, you'd have had to have NASA 140 times the size to install that game on those processors.
Yeah, and
here we are now, a box no bigger than a shoebox, basically.
Well, now look at even Nintendo Switch. You can play Grand Theft Auto Online on Nintendo Switch. That's in your hand. That's for me, even though I know how great technology is, it's incomprehensible. You could play that game with multiple players in it in your hand with that detail. That's mind blowing.
Heck, I remember being, let's see, how old was I? 11 when it hit the States, 10, 11 years old when Pokemon hit the US. Of course, I was a Pokemon fan, who wasn't at our age.
Right.
Remember playing Game Boy, how exciting it was when you could link up the Game Boys and trade. Yeah. Now it's like, you think about it, that was multiplayer back then. Like, I remember wishing that me and all my friends could play the same game of Pokemon. We could all interact in the world, trade and stuff. Now we have it. Our phones have freaking Pokemon Go, which uses our military, technology GPS to put it in the real world. As kids, we would have went nuts. Pokemon Go would have been...
Oh, that'd have been enormous.
It would have been so big that it probably couldn't have kept up with the demand. You know?
For us to get my imagination satisfied as a kid, we used to go out. We used to sneak out at night and go play Manhunt, middle of the night. A bunch of us in dark woods in Florida with gators and snakes and and here I am wanting to see UFOs and ghosts. Right?
I guess when you're playing Manhunt with gators and snakes, you're not the only one playing Manhunt. You're just playing Survive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I told this story a number of times on the podcast, man, because it stands out to me. So we snuck out one night, and a bunch of friends. There's like this park and this big lake, and on the other side of the lake was like a open forest area, like wooded. And a bunch of friends of mine were like, "Oh man, look at that!" They said they saw like shadow figures, and I didn't see it. I was pissed. So I start running over there, ran around this whole lake. And, the moonlight was just lit enough where I could see where I was going. Get there, I don't see shit. I was upset. So I'm walking back, and it didn't dawn on me. I was like, holy shit, there's gators here, snakes. And I just ran over here to see some shadow stuff. Like, I'm I'm a crazy person when it comes up. Eventually I'm going to do a doc, right? I'm going to do a documentary. And if I see something, I'm going right at it. And it might be my undoing, but I'm going right at it. Yeah. So
famous last words of Adam. Here, ghosty, ghosty, ghosty.
Exactly. Because it's not good enough. Like, there's so many of these people, they get these Bigfoot videos, and it's like, not just grainy and off in the distance, but why do they just do nothing more? Are you afraid? I think they're scared, or it's bullshit. Mm-hmm. One or the other. But me, I see Bigfoot, I got to get a sample. And I mean, that if it means I have to run after this thing and get murdered doing it, documentary, I've got to do it. Because I will lose sleep for years if I saw Bigfoot in the distance and all I did was say, wow. I can't do that. I got to get that thing. Rip hair out of its head. I don't give a shit.
Well, so what if it cost a little blood and some teeth and, some skull fractures? Hey, I got some hair,
I'm paralyzed now, but I got its ear.
It took my ability to live, but damn it, I got something out of it.
Yeah, that's what I have to do, because what I do to document, MUFON people are incredible people, man, across the board. I mean, talk about diversity and commitment. Like, my hat's off to them. The paranormal people I speak to, awesome people, man. Like, they're grounded in, they're out there looking at. I mean, there's a guy, David Olson. If you get the opportunity, watch my episode with David Olson. He's got the Ecto 2. He's got a legit, it's an ambulance converted to a paranormal investigative unit. And this guy's a cop, right? And he's got a crazy investment in tools and equipment. So, like, when I meet people like that, it inspires me, because you're not going to invest yourself deep into something unless you really have something out there that it moved you to do it. All right? Because otherwise, I'm not spending $200K if I maybe will see something,
Right. I mean, heck, in the same respect of the occult, I myself, a handful of other people, like I would call them my inner sanctum of people that I know have done the work. They have gone into the depths of many different paths. We go deep, we go head first, and a common problem we face, like you said, diversity and such, we have that in the occult. But the saddest part is at this point in time, it's really becoming more of a status symbol and some type of badge of honor,
Yeah, we do that as humans. I don't know why we do that.
I mean, that goes back to, Jung, with the shadow. That's one of the things, like, the left-hand path of, spirituality really is about confronting. I've got, since I came out of the shadows, as I call it, in late 2018, early 2019, and started the Order of Defiant Darkness, there's been a few people, they were brand new back then to all of this, and through various means they've dug through, and they're complete different people. Some of them are great people, like, they're very well grounded, they're very dedicated. And then there's the other side, that they have just become the most terrible, parasitic, I don't even know if you can call them people anymore.
Well, that's what I said earlier. Remember, I was saying all religions, and they all have this really positive message until a self-serving person, a narcissist, gets it at the helm. When you have this guy who's charismatic and can compel people to listen to him, and he's self-serving, it doesn't matter how good your message is. I mean, this could be exampled in terrorism. Do you know the people that commit terrorist acts, they don't even know the full literature. I watched this, I can't remember the show or documentary, where one of the people that worked for Osama bin Laden, when they let him read the full Quran, he went to tears. He didn't realize what he was doing was wrong. He didn't realize how much more literature there was there. He had no idea. So all these people he killed, he thought he literally, legitimately believed he did it in the honor of God. Because a charismatic person who took the helm with self-serving needs controlled all these people. We see this in Christianity too. These evangelicals, they're on TV like, oh, the Lord. And the best part, when you see people like, praising this guy, I feel like I could do the same thing. Like, I was like, and Jesus, hold on, I'm getting a phone call. That was Jesus, and people believe this shit.
We have the same thing in the LHP. I'm actually currently embattled with a very delusional, sick narcissist that is gathering people up and just spouting the most outlandish, to be frank, the most outlandish load of horse shit I've heard since pop culture, you know,
Right.
and it's really bogging it down. I mean, we've had, in just the past couple of years, we've had numerous instances of people hijacking it. You know, there was one recent one that made world media. I'm not going to say the name because you can Google it and figure it out with ease.
Right.
You know, that person had a good start, lost their way, be it through, you know, their own addiction issues, whatever the case may be, but they really did lose sight and got a little too on edge about things, and it honestly cost them their downfall. And the person that I'm in battle with, because when I came into the occult, I came in, you know, when I came out of the shadows, you know, as a public figure, I came to just teach the truth as I know it. I will not spout any bullshit that I can't say that I've seen. You know, if I've heard about it, I'll relate it as I heard it. I'll take it in good faith that it's true, unless it's so outlandish that even I can look and go, yeah, that most likely didn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for me, myself, to get people that message me, you know, after an interview or a podcast, or even just randomly when they stumble upon Order of Defiant Darkness. And, you know, one example, this one's crazy. So this person messages me, and we had some correspondence. I got a little weird sense that something was off. You know, they tried to portray themselves as way too well versed given their age, and it was just a little too jack of all trades kind of thing. Right. You know, because they always talked about this book and that book and this book, and I'm like, that's great, you're doing so much reading, but what are you actually practicing? You know, and they gave me this story about how they found this book that their friends, brothers, uncles, grandfathers, I mean, it's just some outlandish ass, way out of the way thing. And they're like, oh yeah, I found this book with this path working at Lucifer. And, you know, like, I was path working, and one night I accidentally crossed the abyss, and I ended up in this castle where Lucifer crowned me in this like purple robe. And we were like chilling out and cruising around this castle. And I'm just listening to it, and my head is just throbbing, because it's like, that's cool if you're like 7 years old and just discovered your older brother's, you know, satanic Bible. I could see that going around the playground, and you sound really edgy and cool with that, but I'm going to buy that for not even $1. That's a load of horse shit. You don't just accidentally cross the abyss. It will destroy you. Getting crowned, that's a completely different thing. So you're kind of mixing up a bunch of stuff that you've read in other books. No, sorry, I don't believe it.
Yeah, you know, that sounds like, what was that cult that they all wore Nikes and black jumpsuits, and they were going to take a UFO to heaven? What was the name of it? I can't think of the name of it now, but I was watching something about this, and all I could think is, hearing this man, how the hell do these people fall for that? Like, so we got to wear Nikes and a black jumpsuit, right, and shave our heads. It's like, what?
See, minus the shaved head and it not being Nikes, black jumpsuits and tennis shoes. You just described most of my blood relation, because I'm Slavic, so right. That's a Gopnik. You know, that's its own cult, as it were.
Yeah, but all black and Nikes. You're talking about in the 80s and 90s, everyone in Brooklyn.
Right, so, and LA.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was bizarre. So, to your point, what it sounds like he's doing is putting himself in a position like, well, look, I was anointed, and I'm the guy, and you should follow me.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an unhealthy thing to do.
That's exactly what the embattlement is now. For example, one of the things, I cannot stand manipulation. It right. drives me up the wall and through the curtains like a hissing and pissing feral cat. You know, one of the dangers of spirituality is these sick-minded people will use it to manipulate and control other people.
Right, self-serving.
One of the things I found recently, that's plaguing our little quote unquote community is somebody is using past life regressions to implant very sick and twisted memories to control people. That's not only a complete and utter disgusting action on the whole, that's unethical as a spiritualist that claims to be about liberation, to be about freedom.
Right.
That is said person is a tyrant and they're on a power trip currently. So it's like, me, I take it to heart because I've worked my ass off to build what I've built. And, I've made connections. At one point, just a couple years ago, I was working 18 hours a day on Order of Defiant Darkness stuff, podcasts, interviews, content, doing the magical work to put out there and teach people. Here comes along somebody that latches onto that, picks out some fantastical shit, and all of a sudden they're this great and, informed luminary. No, you're not.
So check it out. What you just described, for this person anyway, is identical to what took place in Rome with Catholicism many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Believe as I do, I'm the chosen one, or you will be slaughtered. Right? The only difference from then until today is today there's laws saying you can't slaughter people. Back then, if you didn't believe the way they did, it's game over. If you look at ancient Greek technology and the stuff they were inventing, it was remarkable. And I remember being fascinated, like, wow, why didn't they continue with this? Like, where would we be? And it turns out that Rome went to Greece and Catholicism followed, and they deemed that to be witchcraft, or not, maybe not the word they used then, but something that's against their God. And they put a halt to it. We're 2,000 years behind the ball in technology. You know where we'd be right now if we didn't have that interference and they continued to invent? We'd be interplanetary already. We'd already 2,000. Look what cell phones did in a decade. Now imagine 2,000 years added to that. We would be at another planet, abducting other people. So hopefully they'd be smarter than the lack of common sense we deal with in society today. So if we're going to abduct other planetary beings, pick out the smart ones. People tell me too, I get this so much, man. Like you were telling me about some of the messages you get. I hear that one of the things I hear a lot, one guy, so I'll have to send you a copy of this message too. I'm not gonna throw his name out there, but he's like, listen, man, your theory is really good. It sounds too perfect. Like, you got to watch out. They're going to come for you. And I was like, who's going to come for me? So long story short, Raptoids, I think he said the words. I'll have to look it up again. But Raptoids are going to kill me because my theories are too good. I'm speaking. I got to narrow what I'm saying. Another guy off podcast was talking on the phone. I was, vetting him for the podcast, and the microwave beeped, and he because he thought I was in the CIA, I guess, and hung up on me. I was like, okay, but
sadly, paranoia runs very deep in the UFO side, and
it's nuts. And
some of it.
Top it off real quick before I let you go on with this real quick.
Oh yeah.
People give me pushback. I'm like, well, why are you talking about abduction? It's not real. Like, well, we abduct all the time. We abduct animals to study them. We abduct them for their DNA. We put ears on mice, on living things to experiment. We do this all the time. Now talk about an advanced life form that wants to, maybe become a hybrid here. Like I said earlier, this takes forever to do. They need subjects. They need study. And to put people at rest, what I think is, and I say this because I try to base it on how humans would do it. I don't think they want us to blow each other up because they care, but we're the study here. And if we blow ourselves up, not only do they lose a very interesting channel, but now their science study's screwed. So that would be their only motivation to get involved if we're going to get nuclear per se.
Oh yeah. The loss of humanity would be catastrophic for a lot of extraterrestrial civilizations because of the melting pot that it's been for 10,000 plus years of, humankind alone. We were talking earlier about the ancient thing, the pyramids. All three of them are actually lined up to a perfect alignment of a constellation from 10,000 years ago. how is that possible?
Yeah, that's a good point. I read that too, God.
It's like, so yeah, there would be a huge loss to the melting pot that has become. I mean, hybridization, it's nothing new. People that talk about, oh, it's just started in the 50s. No, I hate to bust it to you, but it actually goes way back. The misshapen skulls that we found, depictions of humans with these elongated skulls, that is hybridization from many, many thousands of years ago. At this point in time, if there's somebody on this planet that doesn't have some bit of hybridization genetics, it would be more astounding that they don't than someone that conclusively does,
Right. And top it off, let's say that they were doing that to their skulls purposely to look like their god. Isn't it a little weird that their god happens to have that shape?
Well, see, that theory, that one was actually kind of almost sort of debunked, because you can't, even slowly, you can't mutate the human skull. I mean, I've had head injuries. I'm sure you've had some pretty significant head injuries. A lot of listeners probably have.
Right.
That does a number on the brain. So even as slowly as it would take to craft that skull into that shape, it would still cause severe damage to the brain that it wouldn't function. It would either shut down, or they would be just shy of licking the paint off the walls.
Right.
Yeah,
it's still an organ, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough to say because there's so many theories that float around. But one thing I keep drawing back to, and like you said about the pyramids, the alignment of the stars, 10,000 years ago they would have been aligned that way. There's a lot of things. Like I don't buy for a second that those pyramids were made 3,000 years ago. I don't think, not for a second do I buy that. I probably would not have been the way I am if I didn't watch some of or listen to some of Graham Hancock and learn some of these things about civilizations come and gone. But another point too we discussed earlier, the pyramids, the Mayans, all these ancient peoples from all over the globe who had really no way to communicate at all, built very similar things and had very similar beliefs and very similar visuals that they looked upon, right? Even what caught me too is just these paintings from biblical times or thereafter, where it depicts a UFO in it, and people try to give me every reason of what it is but UFO, and every time I look at it, I think that's by definition UFO. I mean, it looks just like it. I mean, depicted perfectly. I don't know. It's so for you were a contactee, right? Mm-hmm. What was your overall feeling of that?
It was actually kept from me until I didn't have memories of it. Like, I knew something wasn't right, but it's like every time they did it, they would lock it away in my memory.
Right.
I would remember laying in bed at say 9 p.m. and there was a flash of light, and then next thing I know, it's like 5, 6 a.m.
I hear that a lot too, actually. And to be honest, look, I watched this show some time ago. It's well over a decade now, called Future Weapons. And on that, that. Yeah, and on that program, they had a machine or a weapon that would use radio waves or sound waves. I'm sorry, and it could either render you unconscious or it could, combust your lungs, kill you internally.
They actually have a cut down version of that they use as anti-riot. I think it's Dallas, Texas, and LA have it where they use it, and because they were actually going to deploy it to the riots a couple years ago, but there was some logistical problems. They couldn't get it there. But yeah, they've tuned it down because, like you said, it can explode your organs.
Right. And if you listen to the episode with Steve Murr and there was one I titled Frequencies. Like, we were discussing how UFOs use certain vibrations and frequencies to move about, which, and long short, it sounds practical. It sounds actually like reality, especially when you look at what sound waves could do to sand on a piece of metal and the perfectly geometrical shapes it creates, like based on what hertz it is.
Semantics, I think it is.
So that being said, it's very feasible for you to take a sound wave, aim it at someone's head, and render them unconscious. Very feasible. Right?
A little thing here that you'll probably find interesting that I discovered once becoming conscious of my contact, is that you'll hear a lot of contactees talk about, we'll hear tunes or tones that nobody hears. Sometimes it's like, it almost feels like it's ringing in the ear, but with no
high pitch.
explanation.
Here, continue. Yeah. I'm going to read something in a second. Glad you said that.
One of the things that I discovered is I'm very audiophile and very much like a musical savant in a way.
Right.
People are always coming to me. They're like, "Oh, what's the name of this song?" And like they, tap out the tune and I can tell it. Like I'm that much of a savant in that category. And one of the things I discovered through conscious contact is that they actually use musical notes at different frequencies to announce their arrival. One of the ones that I recall is an A note at 432 hertz. Even now, when I hear an A note tuned to 432 hertz, it gives me that goosebump feeling, because it's like my brain instantly thinks back to, that's them coming. That's them trying to let me know they're coming,
I literally listen to Mozart and Beethoven at 432 hertz all the time for relaxation.
Yeah. 432 hertz is not a joke. Like people, I've had to go through it. I've even delved in kind of like in a musical theory in a way that, there's talk of like the angelic frequencies and such, celestial frequencies, and they're not wrong. There's also the demonic or the infernal frequencies. Back in the mid 2000s, I was in a black metal band, and we played around with the infernal frequencies. Our most popular song that, we didn't get like super huge or anything, sadly, because bad time, bad place, bad era, emo was running the game.
Right.
But our biggest song, Iconic Virgin Whore, was actually done using the infernal tones, and people couldn't figure out why. Those that were aligned to that, the dark, the death, the abysmal, fans of that, they couldn't figure out why the song was so addictive. Like they would listen to it and they're like, oh, I want to hear it again, and like they would put it on regular rotation. We had on MySpace, that tells you the time frame.
Yeah.
A lot of people that came across it, favored it and stuff, and it drew the attention of some other bands. I made friends with a Dutch band by the name of Necromortica because of it. And, they wanted to know, like they could pick up that something was off on it. They weren't sure what it was. So the lead singer and I of Necromortica, we had a long chat, and I explained it to them, how we did it. And, they did a song, Winter Demon, using a very similar style. And Winter Demon was one of their biggest hits, so it's there is a thing to that, and it's just now being recognized, quote unquote, scientifically, that these frequencies do different things, and we're not even really sure what they can do.
Well, there's a study you could read. Most music and television and radio early on was in 432 hertz. It was more of a relaxing tone. And then somewhere in the 50s, they changed it to 440, and they found that 440 keeps people in a state of discomfort. So it could be more suggestive. So when you like see a commercial or an ad, you're like, do I need that? Even though it's some shit you'll never buy. They're like, maybe I do need. How many times do you watch these commercials with doctors? And like, ask your doctor if this medication is right for you. And for whatever reason, and even me get guilty of this, like, do I need this shit? Like it sounds like something that happened to me. It keeps you in a state that's discomfort. It keeps, and so when I started learning more about 432 hertz and how to relax, because I think a lot. I'm one of these people. If I watch a cliffhanger show or a documentary, I'm up all night. I can't sleep. I have to process this. I have to figure it out. It's not good enough. I currently go to sleep at 432 hertz, Mozart, Beethoven, even Yanni, just piano, relaxing piano. Because just before I'm doing that, I'm listening to a documentary. And I had this thing, a documentary discussing the bubble of our universe and how there might be multiple universes. And I tried comprehending that. And like maybe this bubble there's an Earth in this bubble universe, and there's an Earth in the next one. And I could be living in another universe just doing different things. And so if I don't do something to relax myself at night, forget it. All night. Right. I will think all night. Computer, my brain, right? It's terrible. And to read about what I was saying earlier, I'd put check marks on things, right? I still handwrite notes. And for those who've been either been abducted or contacted, they all say the same thing. A huge amount of checks near ringing in the ears just prior. Every time. So I take notes on a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah, and that's good because, occult wise, when I have interactions with people, like when we're talking post ritual or post path working or even during the path working, it's not uncommon for us to record our private conversations because sometimes things come up that we're not consciously thinking of.
Right.
Heck, it wasn't recorded, sadly, which I think it was probably not meant to be, but a friend at the time called me, and a spirit used my friend to relay a message to me, through channeling.
Right.
They were like slightly inebriated. Okay, they were pretty inebriated, being honest. But that was a perfect time because when you're out of your mind in that sense,
you have no defense. Your entry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I myself, I always say it and I reiterate it every chance I get. I'm anti-drug, Right. I've watched too many people. Same. I've lost too many friends, just distance due to drugs, and some of them have died. Most recently, I, had a failed engagement because of drugs. So yeah, me and drugs are mortal enemies. So I don't encourage people at all or advocate any use of them. But in the same vein, if you can get yourself out of your closed bubble, you'd be surprised at the things you can pick up. You don't even have to be super sensitive to just start picking up on messages and signs and everything, Well,
yeah, also, if you look at the construct of the human brain, again, computer, everything about your skull, your brain suggests that it's like a receptor. I was talking to some psychics about this. Like, I think everyone has the ability to be psychic. It just depends on your software, because we all have the hardware. It just depends on the software. Some people have different software. Some people are more perspective. Like I was saying about the sound waves, and I saw a documentary about this a long time ago. They were experimenting with sending people messages with sound waves and to see if they could repeat what it is that was in the sound wave. And about 60% of them were able to say the sentence or paragraph, anyhow, of what it was that was directed to them with sound waves. Because those sound waves, when they hit your skull, it starts bouncing around the inside of the skull. And then you have, obviously, receptors in your brain that can pick it up. So I think science in the next decade, I think they're gonna bridge the gap between paranormal and what we consider normal, I guess, because all paranormal is parallel to our normal until it's understood.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to bridge that soon.
It's on the occult side of thing, I've been saying it for quite a while that because people, one of the things that people come into the LHP for is they want to learn black magic and curses and all this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Mostly seeking power trips. It's kind of not as bad as it was, but it's still got its stray animals.
I probably had a couple exes show up too, right?
Maybe.
I probably did, yeah. I mean, if they're inquiring about that, that's guaranteed they showed up.
So, what I've taught people is the core of magic is just energy. It's nothing too terribly fantastic. It's just, it gets fantastic once you learn how to work with it, how to direct it in that sense. That can be done with simple thought forms, ancient times, the ley lines, that was a form of magic that was utilized. When you look at a lot of ancient cities, what are they built on? The ley lines. The more powerful the ley line, usually the more iconic the city. That wasn't accidental. Right. They used to have magicians back then. Ancient Egypt, magicians held court right next to the pharaohs, you know. I'm trying to think, Babylonian, Sumeria, even Chinese.
Well,
heck,
I mean, listen, Christianity as well, right?
Yeah.
Look,
they just didn't want to admit it.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic. I currently believe in whatever, you know. But when you hear and read about Catholicism, it sounds, I mean, just remarkably similar. It's just, except they were like, well, no, we're the chosen ones. And it's crazy to think about them condemning other religions and belief systems when literally some guy was talking to a bush on fire. And for all he knows, that bush was just like the chemicals from the bush. You inhaled it and you're high, you know? So all sorts of magical stuff happens in the Bible too. Just, again, it's the accepted religion, I guess. And I don't know. It drives me nuts when I hear that.
It's got the best PR campaign.
Right.
But, you know, you mentioned about in the Bible, you know, magical stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with it or any listeners. There's actually a spell book in the Bible. It's in every Bible. It's the Book of Psalms.
Oh yeah.
I myself use it. That's one of the things that I've learned in my workings with El Shaddai.
Well, you know why Catholicism and Christianity emerges the more powerful religion. It's because it was adopted by Rome. Constantine literally championed for that. Not just but words, but Constantine was a conqueror. That guy was a monster, you know? So why is it more popular and accepted? It's because it was beaten into the fabric of society. It wasn't, you know, and by the time it got here, and to our founding fathers' credit and thankful, you know, religion here, it's sacred, believe what you want, be what you want. But for many thousands of years, that was not the case. It's either you believe this way or you're getting burned. Or worse. It's so, for the occult, the biggest question that the Christians get, that the Jewish people get, that where do we go post-life?
Oh, I mean, my perspective, you know, teenage suicide survivor, I've actually had it confirmed by another person, which is ironic. We both went to the same place. I call it the void. That's assuming that you take your life by your own hand. So people, don't do it. Trust me, it's not good. Seek help desperately. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, saying that in full faith.
Right.
But, you know, I've faced death multitude of times. This time last year, about this time the year before, 2020 and 2021, I was literally a week away from death. I had to be life flighted in 2020. So, you know, I'm no stranger to death. From what I've experienced, it's a matter of kind of like you said, recycling in a sense, you know, reincarnating. You know, if you do past life regressions, find a good person that's solid foundation and doesn't try to steer it. And you'll be surprised at some of the things you can learn that you've experienced before that you probably wonder why you know, like you think of something and it's like, I almost feel like I've done that before, but you can't put yourself in that position in this lifetime. You know what I mean? You'll come across a lot of that. So I really, in my experience and my opinion and my belief is that, you know, depending on how we've done in this lifetime, we move on to another one. Maybe human, maybe animal, maybe insect. It's hard to tell.
You know, and another thing too, with the energy of again, what we're living in right now is our machine, right? It's a really complex biological machine. And your soul, aka your consciousness, is the energy that drives it. It's who you are. And when you do recycle, I firmly believe this too, because I've heard these kids that talk about previous life and it's remarkably accurate. Just like energy, when we send things with fiber optic cables, we're sending information via light and energy. Now, when you delete a file from your computer, it's deleted on your computer, but it's not permanently gone. There's some of it, that information is still attached somewhere. We notice as people get computers and they can get into them and they can reconstruct old information. That's why computers get destroyed from the government level. But the same for us. So when you recycle, that energy's in a new body. It's taken on a new, the consciousness is taking on a new life because it's starting over. but there's still that little bit of information attached. And some people could bring it out, others just suppress it, or they just go their whole lives not even knowing it. But the information is always attached to that energy. I believe so.
Definitely.
Before we close your podcast, tell everybody what it is and where they can find it.
It's called Order of Defiant Darkness. It's the audio only podcasts are exclusively on Spotify and Anchor. I do some live streams and some video podcasts on YouTube. Again, it's under Order of Defiant Darkness. That term will find it. You can Google it. There's a website, orderofdefiantdarkness.com, Facebook, Instagram, same thing, Order of Defiant Darkness. You'll find us. You'll mostly see me because I kind of just got shoved into being the public face of it, which is fine. But that's like the best way to find it. If you want to reach out to me personally, one-on-one, if you have questions or you want to tell something about, you've encountered occult-wise or paranormal, whatever, look up my profile on Facebook under the name Gregory Rasputin. It'll have the Order of Defiant Darkness as a burning inverted pentagram as the profile picture. Just say that, you found me from 3PNR and, we'll chat from there. I'm pretty busy with a lot of stuff, so if I don't respond, I promise I'm not ignoring you. It's just give me time to respond.
Indeed. I'll have all the links to that in the description. Elric, it's been great. I had a great conversation. I'm sure we're going to do it again, and I look forward to it.
Definitely, man. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to the next time.
Indeed. Have a good night.
Yep.